And we're live. Not only are we live, but we are free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I am free at last. The hostage takers released me. And I want to talk about American Airlines in a moment. It is Friday, February 21st, the year of our Lord 2025. It is 8 a.m. And Mr. Cactus?
Uh-oh. Is he out about it? Oh.
We're watching Dog Shirt TV, an effing revolution in morning television.
It is an effing revolution in morning television because where else can you tune in at 8 in the morning to hear my travel travails from yesterday, wherein I got on an airplane in Miami to fly to Washington Reagan National Airport, which I, being an old-time Washingtonian, refuse to call Reagan. I call it National. Deal with it. And we're going to fly to National, and I have to fly to National because that's where my car is, because I left my car at the airport, as one does. And then the plane takes off and it flies 2.5 hours from Miami. And there is a VIP movement of unspecified character at Washington National Airport, and the plane goes into a holding pattern, circling around and around the airport, and you can see the map on Dog Shirt Daily that it took. It circled around and around and around until it ran out of fuel. And when it ran out of fuel, the captain came on and said, I'm afraid we can no longer be in this holding pattern because we will crash. And so we are being diverted to Dulles. And so my flight to National was diverted to Dulles. And we landed at Dulles a respectable 1 hour late. 1 hour late in the wrong airport, not the biggest deal in the world, but that is when the hostage ordeal began. Because at that point, all the passengers were given a choice. We could get off the plane and make our own way home or to National Airport for a connection, or in my case, to National Airport to pick up my car and drive home. And the smart people on the plane, and there were a number of them, all got off because they said, as John Bolton said about the perfect Zelensky phone call, this is a drug deal. I'm not doing this. And so Quinta Jurecic got off the plane. And my colleague Tom Wheeler got off the plane. But did I get off the plane? No.
No.
And there were two reasons for that.
Because you're not very smart.
Three reasons. Reason number one,
because
lawyer.
You're not
because I am not really very smart. I stayed on the plane.
You're not a real lawyer.
Reason number two was because my car was at National, and I was going to take an Uber or a taxi to National and get stuck in traffic, or I was going to stay on the plane for the shortest commercial flight in history. It's the only opportunity I ever had in my life or will ever have to take an intra-city commercial jetliner flight. Flying time, 9 minutes, altitude, 5,000 feet. Seriously, that's what they announced. And so I stayed on the plane. And folks, that brings me to the third reason. It was for you. I was going to film and narrate the whole thing. Dog Shirt TV, the shortest commercial flight ever, with this here story that I am now unfolding, being told in real time as we take off, fly, and land within the same metropolitan area. And so I stayed on the flight feeling smug because I was going to get my car, get some cool content, hashtag anything for content, and I was going to get something amusing out of this VIP movement travel experience. And so we pushed back from the gate, and we taxied out to the tarmac, and I had my little camera phone ready because, guys, this is why God created camera phones, right? So that you can film the shortest ever commercial flight that you're ever going to be on and narrate it, and it would be amusing. And then we sat on the tarmac for 2 hours being held hostage by American Airlines until what brought the situation to an end? What brought the ordeal to an end? The maximum flying hours allowable to the co-pilot and pilot were exceeded. And so 2.5 hours later, we turned back and went back to the gate, and I did not get the shortest ever.
How disappointing.
Yeah, I wept bitter tears about it. But I console myself with this, that maximum flying time regulation
is
about as dead as any regulation is going to be, because the Doge is going to do away with it, and we are going to be free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last to take really short flights, because this is America. Look, we are not allowed to have fun anymore. We are not even allowed to get off airplanes within 5 hours of when they're supposed to arrive. But we are allowed to have Dr. Beth Stuebing joining us on the show. Holly, please introduce our guest.
Yeah, I was going to do a really cool segue of, all the regulation is going to go away, just like USAID has gone away. And that's what Dr. Beth has been witnessing. So Dr. Beth Stuebing is a friend of mine. We sort of grew up together. We went to the same school, but were you there at the same time as me? I can't remember. She was younger than me.
At least for a year. Yeah, a year or two, I think. You were one of those cool upperclassmen while I was a nerdy junior higher.
So are you a missionary kid too?
I am.
Yeah, but she's
not
cooler.
nearly the trauma as some other people.
Her parents were not quite as crazy as a lot of our parents. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, now she is a trauma surgeon in Malawi at a Malawian hospital. She does not work for USAID, but she is intimately familiar with all the work in Malawi and has witnessed a lot of chaos and craziness there. And so I thought it would be good to bring her on and have her share with us what is going on in Africa in the wake of USAID's demise.
Spectacular. So we have heard from Ukrainians about the impact on Ukraine of the, cutoff in foreign aid and how far-reaching the effect is. I suspect it looks quite different in some ways and similar in other ways in Malawi. But walk us through it. What happens when you issue an executive order that says, all stop work, all existing contracts and grants are on hold, don't do any work on them, no new ones, and by the way, if you're a federal contractor to USAID, you're not even going to get paid for past work. What happens on the ground in Malawi?
Well, I think it's there's all kinds of things happening. There's sort of can you hear me?
It's Malawi internet connection, I'm afraid.
Uh-oh.
Okay, there you go. You're back.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, this is the best internet I can find.
No worries. So this is just a note about the platform, because it's Holly, if Beth blinks out, don't worry about it, because it's recording locally for her and it'll just upload and it'll come out fine.
I will use Riverside. So
just keep talking even if you think we may not be hearing you, which we may not be.
I do a lot of that anyway. So.
Anyway, you were saying.
Okay. So, aside from all the myriad sort of details of each program that's been affected, I think the overall issue is Malawi is one of the world's most aid-dependent countries, whether it's USAID, the US government, or a myriad of other NGOs and such. And so the sort of the fingerprints of USAID is everywhere, and it's more in partnerships with all of these other organizations than it is necessarily in just one, USAID designated program. So a lot of other organizations, whether it's, UN type of places or other governments or other NGOs or universities, they usually have part of their programming partly funded by USAID. And often they don't even know what percentage of their budget is from USAID. I talked to somebody who said they had to go to their accountant the day the freeze happened to see which part of their staff, who all do the same job, had to go home and which could still stay. And so it's not just affected USAID type of things, but it's affected like everything. And so a lot of those are not under waivers, or there's confusion about whether there's a waiver. So kind of the whole, aid community has come to a standstill to the point where organizations that are not USAID at all are having to draw up new budgets and deciding who to fire because they can't count on that USAID money that has been there and has been one of their most reliable sources of funding for a very long time. So I think we're not even going to see the effect of some of those kind of things for a while, but it's going to be bad.
And so what have you seen? I mean, other than the discussion of, oh, we're going to have to fire or lay off X number of people, like what is the, from the served community's point of view, what are the things that are not happening today that were happening a month ago?
So, again, it varies widely. For things that I personally interact with, so I'm a surgeon at a big mission hospital and just train surgery residents. I'm not really involved in HIV or malaria or TB, but all of those programs just were shuttered, suddenly. And then they were, at least the HIV portion was reopened after a few days or a week, and that story happened across Malawi. The malaria program,
And Malawi is a hard hit HIV community, right? In the way that all of Southern Africa
probably around 10% of the population is HIV positive. And it's one of the poorest countries in the world, so that this is how people are taken care of. And so those programs directly affected my hospital, and some of them are now under partial waiver type things, and so some things have restarted. But I also sponsor a student at the local nursing college next to the hospital, and I was talking with him, and he said 20 of his classmates had lost their funding completely right the same week that 3 semesters worth of their tuition was due, which includes their money for food. And these are like the poorest kids in the whole school, which is why they are on a grant. And it's the most reliable income for the school's tuition, so they pay the internet that way, that applies for the whole school. It basically keeps the school running, and right when they were due to have this infusion of cash, it wasn't coming, and it threatened to close the whole school, let alone those 20 kids who now were like not eating. So that's been something that I've spent a lot of time on in the last, week or two is to try to help those kids because they don't fall under a waiver, and we can't afford to have the nursing college shut down. Um, like we need those students to rotate at the hospital. That's just one of many, many examples. I know that there are students across Malawi, across, many different fields of study that are in the same situation, and I can't save them. So,
Right. So let
yeah.
me let me dive a little deeper on 20 nursing students in Malawi, because
Hmm.
there are people in this country who will react to that by saying, why should my hard-earned taxpayer dollars go to paying for tuition and food for
Hmm.
nursing students in Malawi
Right.
rather than rather than there's a nursing crisis in my
Hmm.
own community hospital where I
Hmm.
see on television that we can't
Right.
get enough nurses or doctors in a lot of rural
Hmm.
communities. What does it cost to support a Malawian um, nursing student for a semester? What's the
$541.
$541
Yeah.
per and
Yeah.
that covers
For
everything?
half a year. It
Right. So
covers
we're
everything.
talking about
Yeah.
a a really
Pennies.
vanishingly trivial cost that has a
Yes.
huge impact.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right, and just
And,
to I wanna
looking
flesh
long
out.
term, sorry.
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to flesh out what we get for $541 for 6 months. Um, it seems to me that if you're concerned about controlling the spread of HIV, which of course is prevalent in other places in the world, including here, $541 to make sure that a whole lot of people get their antiretrovirals is a pretty good investment.
Hmm. And that they don't develop resistance and then bring that around the world. Yeah. Right.
Um,
Lots of follow-on effects. How are so what have you been able to do for I know you said you sponsored one of them. Are they at the
So
nursing
I
school?
heard I heard this information from a different student, the one that I sponsor, who's the son of my
Right.
housekeeper here. Um, and so because I was able to go and interview these students and the administration and hear like get all the details, then I in a different conversation with a donor group that helps the hospital with our training programs, I made them aware of this. And because they are all so active in Malawi and connected to the hospital where I work, they were able to actually take over at least one semester of those students, which is amazing. Because I don't know, where I would have gone after that.
Yeah, yeah.
and what
Hmm.
is imagine for a minute that this conversation were not just between the three of us and the 24 people who were joining us live, but was going to be watched by thousands of other people later who reacted with some outrage to this and wanted to support Malawian nursing students who may be being displaced as a result of uh, this freeze. Is there some uh, charity group um, that is supporting these students that people can donate to, or is this a kind of an ad hoc thing where you're grabbing $541 here and there?
Right. Well, sort of yes and no. So, um, it's one of the other things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about this week is like, how am I, even if I have the funds, how am I supposed to take the place of like thousands of bureaucrats, um, to distribute these funds in an appropriate way that's not going to be, funneled off to the wrong people and on and on. So, I have a connection with one school that has 20 students in a program and a connection with one donor that is like trusted and has a system, and I got that taken care of. But I mean, I have no idea even how many students are affected across Malawi. It's probably through a myriad of other partner organizations. And so really, and that none of that is my job, like I'm a
Right.
surgeon. I'm not, so I don't even know.
No,
I'm not a
and
finance person. And
one of
so
the things
really, this
that
stuff
people
needs
don't
to be reinstated because I
yeah.
can't do the job of 100 people, and I would do it poorly I'm probably doing it poorly now, you know?
So one of the things that people do not understand about USAID is that people think that it is a mechanism by which U.S. taxpayer dollars go off to foreign countries and get sucked up by waste, fraud, and abuse by local organizations. It is exactly the opposite. It is a system
Right.
of bureaucracy that actually requires audits from those
Ah,
organizations, that
Right.
actually
Right.
provides a mechanism of oversight so that money is spent appropriately. You take it away and you end up with this
Right.
situation where, we could
Yeah.
raise a lot of money, but
and
we
then
have no mechanism to do oversight with it. And so
Right.
it gets
Right.
it becomes very, very hard to spend in a responsible way because those 100
Absolutely.
bureaucrats who Elon Musk loves to shit on are actually doing something important, which is
Right.
distributing money in a
Absolutely.
rational way with oversight that you can
yeah,
have a certain amount of confidence in. Are there problems?
hmm
Yes,
sure.
of course.
Sure. Yeah.
These are hard environments to operate in, and there are
Right.
environments in which things can be messy and ugly. And if you go look under a lot of rocks, you're going to find some worms. The alternative to it is either not doing it at all, which is horrible for a lot of reasons, or doing it in a fashion that is much more haphazard and much worse. And as Holly can tell you, and maybe she should right now, it's not like if you leave this stuff to private sector missionary organizations, you get rid of all the waste, fraud, and abuse. And
No.
so I just want to
Absolutely.
spotlight Beth's point here that there's not like it's not like you can easily just step up and have the private sector and private donors replicate
Right.
what USAID is doing. There is no, as you
Right.
guys know, I put up links and say, give to this charity because, they're doing good work on identifying trans murder victims or whatever. There's no address for this.
Yeah.
And that's what
hmm
happens when you take the US government away. Sorry, a little mini rant.
No, it's true. I mean, that's true across the government too, by the way, is there's a lot of the bureaucracy, which I mean, it's a cost benefit. You have to do oversight. You have to have bureaucracy. To have responsibility, you have to have bureaucracy. So, I mean, you could say that there's too much bureaucracy or this and that, but then it's not like you're getting nothing for the bureaucracy. You're getting oversight and you're getting, regulation and you're getting all of these things.
Accountability. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just to get USAID money, just people don't know, like these small NGOs, I've known people who have had small NGOs and have applied for a USAID. You can apply for a USAID grant, but even just to apply and get the money, you have to, it's a whole rigorous application. You have to have a plan
hmm
and then you have to be able to show that you're doing after the fact, you have to show that you are doing what you said in the plan, and there's audits and all of these things, to prevent corruption. So it's not like, yeah, and private charities, frankly, yeah, all missionaries are not corrupt ever. Mission organizations are never corrupt. Yeah. What I suspect will happen, like with something like Samaritan's Purse, which I've seen different things about its finances, quite frankly. It does some good work. That's Franklin Graham, Trump's BFF. Franklin Graham, he's supporting, even though he gets USAID money for Samaritan's Purse, he's, supporting the president, of course, in the shutting down of USAID. But what I suspect will happen, and again, this is happening across the government and will happen, Franklin Graham will get his money. He may even get more money because he's a patron, or he's the supplicant of the patron, Elon and Donald Trump. But he'll probably get the money with less oversight. There'll probably be more waste. He'll.
Well, he'll certainly not. I mean, whether there'll be more waste is a matter of luck, right? He, and a matter of, but what there won't be is a competitive environment in which a reasonable set of bureaucrats, and I use the word bureaucrat in the snazzy French sense of the word, as like it's a good thing that we have a bureaucracy. The alternative is not to have a bureaucracy. And there won't be a competitive environment in which a bunch of bureaucrats will sit around a table and look at all the proposals and say this one's the best. And oh, look, it's by a Christian missionary group. Great, that's fine. This one is also great. It's by the atheists of Cleveland. Terrific. That won't happen. And when you remove that competitive environment, what you get is corruption.
Yeah, usually. So I'm sure Franklin Graham is on the up and up. I have another on a different, slightly related, obviously, but different topic, Beth. So one thing I'm confused about, and I think we're having trouble figuring out is and I know you're not USAID, but I'm sure you have connections to the community. So people were ordered to evacuate, but then there was a court order, and that was, put on hold. So my question is, are the USAID people that you know of, are they still in the country, or have some left and some there? Are they working? I think they're getting paid per the court order, but are they actually doing work, or what do you know about what the actual personnel in the country are doing?
So, to my knowledge, nobody has actually left the country. I think they are staying put. I'm not sure the wordings of their orders or all of that. I know on some of our sort of community WhatsApp groups, because my kids are in school with all of their kids, and I know some of those families very well. There was at least one message on one of those groups like, I might be selling a whole bunch of stuff soon, even though I don't want to. And they're like all the sad faces afterwards. But then we didn't see anything like that. And so I think if people were leaving and they thought it was for good, like I would see more of those massive sale sort of signs. I think for a while, nobody was really doing any work. I have heard that people do have access to their computers now, at least some people. So something is being done, but I have no idea what and on what programs or anything like that. A lot of those sort of allied organizations, I think, are still running into some roadblocks. So the sort of administrative piece of USAID is still largely not happening, but it depends on which program and whether there's a waiver and on and on and on. And I know there's a lot of advocacy going on around those issues to, the government.
I'm just finding my contacts are extremely reluctant to talk, certainly not via text, or signal even.
Yes. Yes.
There seems to be a real climate of fear of even saying anything about what's going on, not only USAID, but other agencies. But I've just been trying to figure that out, because I do know some who have, not from Malawi, but other countries, who had already evacuated by the time the court order came down. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm here and have texted people, but I hear nothing. And I don't blame them,
Yeah, no, it's really creepy, actually. I find the texts back that I get, or emails, very creepy. It's like it's clearly like purposely worded and cryptic, and it's creepy.
So, since there has been a court order last week that purports to temporarily restrain um, the freeze, and then have you seen any change?
Um, I can only report what I have heard from the people I have been able to talk to, and um, so far, at least as of I think a couple days ago or yesterday, there hasn't really been any noticeable change. Again, there may be in some areas or some programs, but not in the ones that I have heard about. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
consistent with my sense that since Judge Ali entered this ruling last week, there has been the government's response has been, I wouldn't say quite massive resistance, but at least not uh, not obvious compliance. And he yesterday issued a ruling trying to enforce his ruling. He's a very new judge, and there's a
Hmm.
little bit of a sure-footedness problem. The rulings are not written very precisely, and I think he's
Hmm.
inadvertently giving the State Department and USAID. And when I say the State Department here, I mean this guy, Pete Maraca, who is the person behind all this, um, uh, more wiggle room than a more sure-footed district judge would do. And I don't mean that in as an ideological criticism of him. He's literally been on the bench for like a month and a half, and I think he
Hmm.
was confirmed in December, and he
Oh
has
boy.
a like, want to talk trial by fire, right? And so, uh, I think it's going to take a few weeks for the litigation to isolate the precise issues that he's um, ordering them to stop freezing, and then there will be a compliance question. So I think you know, I'm not sure I've ever seen a situation where as many lives and jobs turns on the specific wording of a
Right.
specific court order as this. But it's,
Right.
I again, with all respect to Judge Ali, whom I have nothing against, I really wish this case had a judge who had served for 10 years before getting assigned to it. It
Yeah,
Right.
just
it
like
just
like
very
you
a
Yeah.
lot of
want somebody
confusion.
who really, really
Hmm.
um, you know, just
Knows what they're
has a
getting
lot of
into.
confidence, and it's like having, a multiple gunshot patient and it's your first trauma surgery and you're unsupervised, right? It's
Yeah.
there's just something like, oof,
Yeah.
how did this be the person who's operating on me
Probably not
happen?
gonna end well, right? Yeah.
What are you hearing from just ordinary Malawians? That do they know? They're obviously aware of like what's going on, but what do they make of this? Do they think that the U.S. has just completely lost its mind? What is their view of what is going on and why?
There are a variety of opinions and feelings. I think a lot of it depends on people's education level and, whether they're impacted or not, whether they realize they're impacted or not. A lot of sadness and confusion. This comes at a really hard time for Malawi. There was a drought last year, with like worst in 100 years, so everyone is really hungry. Um, the year before, a cyclone washed away like a whole bunch of crops and a whole bunch of people, and our currency is in like free fall. The black market rate is, 3 times almost what the bank rate is. It's an election year, and so having that sort of stability that undergirds everything, um, is very scary, I think, for everybody from sort of the top to bottom of society. We're in this foreign exchange sort of crisis. Everybody's looking for dollars. Actually, yesterday I was taking my kids to school and there was a giant military truck with like people with guns and dogs like searching cars and people's bedrooms looking for US dollars.
Wow.
Um, because they've like a lot of them just disappeared with this freeze. And uh, so there's even more uneasiness in society. Um, I asked one of my friends at work, like, what are people saying about, this? And she said, what I heard from a lot of people in town is that um, Trump hates the gays and he thinks all of this money goes to the gays, and so he's punishing the rest of us because of that. So it's just one of many kind of twisted interpretations about what this is all about.
I'm not sure that's terribly inaccurate, actually.
I mean, it's at least partly right. Yeah, the part that it misses is that he hates non-gay Southern Africans who aren't Elon Musk too.
Right. Yes, yes. There's a lot of people that fall into the, not cool enough category, but yeah.
So we have a rule on the show that the audience is allowed to interrupt at any time with questions. Linda has a question.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, as you're talking about people losing their jobs and the outcomes for people receiving aid, are there other governments coming in that are looking to maybe take some of that over? Because that's one of the consequences that I know are, sort of hovering out there, that now China, Russia, someone else is going to step into the void and take up some of the soft power, whatever, that we had prior been giving. So that if there's anything you can speak to on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think, China is already here. They, over the past 3 years, they have been redoing or doing for the first time the entire road infrastructure of Lilongwe, the capital city where I live. When I moved here, everything was just like single lanes full of potholes, and this is for like the capital city. And this is mostly funded by China Aid, and now the roads are finished, and in the middle of one of the big roundabouts or rotaries, there's literally a statue, China Aid. And so people see that every day. And Japan is also building one of the bridges. So they're already here. And so a lot of the visual things that are getting better are now not coming from America, and that's only going to increase. What I do worry about is a lot of aid from other countries like that tends to be more in infrastructure and not so much in health, not so much for needy people. It's more like, how can we get your product on a good road to a port so that we can take them out?
And it's also not a gift, it's a loan, and not a
absolutely. It's not out of the goodness of anyone's heart. And these are all good things. I love driving on those roads. It's kinder to my car. But it's not gonna, give a baby malaria medicine. So
and what about the countries that are essentially made out of money, like Norway and the UAE and Qatar, that are they anywhere?
The Scandinavian countries are here quite a bit. And actually, there's orthopedic and neurosurgery hospital that was completed about a year ago or so, that is funded entirely by, I think, a Norwegian family or something like that. And that's the first like real functional MRI in the capital city, for example. So they're doing stuff. I don't think there's nearly the scale
Yeah.
ability for, smaller countries like that. Like they do a lot of aid compared to their GDP, but they are way, way, way down on the list when it comes to overall ability.
Yeah.
And then for kind of the Middle Eastern countries, there is a large sort of Indian and Pakistani ethnicity population in this part of Africa. And they're also doing a number of good things. It's more of that kind of business-minded work, I think. So not as much that I know of, at least as far as sort of the help the needy, the hungry and the sick kind of
And what
stuff
about
that is
what
more
about the
traditionally USAID.
what about the EU as a conglomerate? Does that is there any kind of Brussels presence?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, my, next door neighbors are from the German embassy, and there's, a number of European diplomatic folks around. But again, kind of the scale of the impact is just not anything comparable to what the US government is able to do and has been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
this is
that's just the scaling itself is just makes
Right.
things more
Yeah.
efficient, not only abroad,
hmm
but it's just more efficient too.
yeah,
hmm
this is
And
a
even those
really
countries are also part of those partnering organizations. And so,
Mhm.
one of my friends is from a European country doing, development work, and they have been one of the organizations that has had to look at their finances and say, what part of this is coming from USAID? Because, they're all connected. And so that's part of the greater fallout.
Mhm.
right. This is a really important point that people don't understand, which is that
hmm
the role of U.S. leadership is partly a function of scale. It's partly a function of the fact that the U.S. can be, when it wants, a unitary actor, whereas the European Union cannot because it's
hmm
got,
hmm
you know, 20
Lots of different
some odd
players. Yeah.
countries, one of whom is Hungary and one of whom is Slovakia, right? It's
hmm
got um, it's got the U.S. can be catalytic of other countries' activities. There is no other country in a position to do that. And
hmm
so when you take
hmm
away U.S. leadership on this, you take the guts
hmm
out of the architecture. And it's
hmm
not to say
hmm
that over 20 or 30 years you couldn't build something to replace it, but it would take 20 or 30
hmm
years, and it would
Yeah,
take a
absolutely.
structural revolution in the way other countries do things, because most of
hmm
them are structured so as to fill gaps in the US led system. Um, and
hmm
um, and so you really are talking about a major transition, and doing it suddenly in a blunt force way is, let's just be frank, it's going to kill a lot of people. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and and so, I think the structure of the way these things work matters and is largely invisible to a lot of people. It's really, really important if you're going to get the US out of this business. And by the way, you shouldn't get the US out of this business. It's one of the good things about us.
And it's in
Um,
our own interest.
hmm
it's in our
It's
own interest. There's 1,000
Right,
reasons why
yeah.
the
right,
premise is wrong. But
right.
if you're going to
hmm
do it in a responsible fashion,
Yeah.
because
hmm
that gives,
Right.
the Norwegians have a shitload of money, um, and
hmm
give them a little bit of time to fill gap, to come in where
hmm
you're leaving, right? Like,
hmm
what are the parts that the UAE will take over?
hmm
If you were doing this in a responsible
hmm
fashion,
Yeah.
you would be doing it over 5 or 10 years to get other
hmm
countries into a position to take up some of the slack that you're leaving. Now,
Mhm.
I don't want to give aid and comfort to that project either, because frankly,
Yeah.
I think we should be doing
No.
this stuff. I like U.S.
Mhm.
leadership. It's a
Right.
mechanism of U.S.
Yeah.
power. But
Mhm.
even the wrong thing, there's a right way and a
Yeah.
wrong way to do the wrong thing.
Mhm.
And
And
we
that,
are doing the wrong thing the
Yep.
wrong way.
And I don't
that,
think Europe is going to step up to the plate either. I heard from someone else recently that after everything shut down, they were involved in a meeting with Europeans and some of these organizations saying, hey, look, can you kind of fill the gap? And there's a lot of anxiety in those nations seeing what has happened in politics in the US. They've got kind of the rise of more far right-leaning groups in Europe as well, and said basically, no, we can't because we don't want to make that cohort angry and have the same thing happen in our own countries.
we're
So
also going to have more
I think that
defense
ship has
spending. We're gonna
sailed.
have- the
Right,
Europeans are
right.
also going to have to spend more in defense now because NATO is basically going away.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Mm-hmm.
going to pivot a little bit to your point, Ben, about how there's responsible. There is a legitimate debate about aid and that Africans themselves participate in. There was a famous book maybe 10 years ago by an African economist called Dead
Oh,
Aid.
Dambisa Moyo from
Do you know her?
Zambia.
Yeah, do you know her?
I mean, I read her name. I mean, I read the book and I grew up in Zambia, so I was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
she's been a voice on that. But then here in the U.S., Greg Easterbrook has been a voice on that as well. I think he's done some stuff with her
Mm-hmm.
actually, and they make some very legitimate points. I mean, of course, everybody brings up
Yeah.
the amount of aid that has gone to Africa and the fact that actually poverty has declined quite a bit, not due to aid really, but just due to economic growth. But that, compared to other countries who have gotten less aid, that there hasn't been, Africa's still like far behind. And then to me, the more compelling one is that it allows governments to sort of not do their job because they're kind of skating off the efforts of others. So
Mm-hmm.
and it takes the pressure off. So this people might be out in the streets protesting something, but now these groups are fulfilling that, and it sort of takes the pressure off. And I'm sympathetic to these views,
Yeah.
actually. But it's like, first of all, there's a few different considerations. Just from a purely U.S. interest standpoint, I'm a huge proponent of USAID. There's the purely like humanitarian thing, like just basic food aid, PEPFAR. I mean, again, people will die if you take this away. And then also, again, it's the way you do it. If you want to have if you want to
Mm-hmm.
revisit the question of aid, you don't just like end it overnight. There's a whole,
Right.
that would be a whole process that you would go through.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just, even if you're a critic of aid, which again, I
Yeah.
am sympathetic to a lot of these notions,
Right.
this is clearly not the way.
Yeah, I want to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I just foot stomp
Go
that
ahead.
point? Like, there is a legitimate question about whether the United States is fostering dependency in a bunch of these countries, in whether we're relieving governments of responsibility. All of those questions are completely legitimate. This has nothing to do with any of those questions.
Mm-hmm.
If that was what this was about, we wouldn't also be cutting off aid to restore infrastructure in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
If you that is a question about how you should spend your aid dollars,
Yeah.
not whether you should have the agency,
Right.
whether you should decapitate it and remove the sign from, right? This is a war on the premise that we should be spending money overseas at all.
Yeah.
And I know Greg Easterbrook personally. We were colleagues at Brookings for a long time together. I don't take him to be arguing that we shouldn't be spending money overseas.
No, I don't
Right.
either. It's
And-
just he pointed out some of the,
Right.
issues.
There are just as
Mhm.
there are downsides and uh, ugly sides of, domestic welfare
Sure,
dependency
sure.
policies, there are
Mhm.
similar debates to be had about all kinds of foreign aid.
Mhm.
Fine, let's have those debates.
Right.
Uh, don't cut off the nursing students while we have that discussion, right?
Yeah.
Don't cut
Right.
off people's
Right.
freaking AIDS drugs while we have that discussion.
Yeah.
Have the discussion in a response. And by the
Right.
way, Elon Musk knows nothing about this discussion, right?
Well, he
Right.
doesn't spend any money on charity that I can tell, for one thing.
Uh,
Like, I don't think
Mhm.
he even does any charity that I know of.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, so I,
Mhm.
I just I just think like it gives them a little bit too much credit to
yeah, yeah.
say
Just saying, like,
oh well, there's, Greg Easterbrook and this Zambian woman have, argued blah blah blah, and
Mhm.
therefore there's some argument for it. No, sometimes a stop clock is right twice a day, and actually this clock is not entirely stopped, it's moving just ahead of the correct time. I mean, it's just wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, end of rant.
Yeah.
Beth, say something. We're talking too much.
No, I mean, I fully agree. And actually, a lot of why I'm here and why I'm trying to intervene in the ways I am is so that, we get out of this cycle, and I think that's one of the problems with having these waivers be just for the really, really desperate people. Like one of those nursing students actually asked me, like, why are you choosing us? To help when I get asked for money 1,000 times a day. And I said, well, I'm thinking 10 years from now. Like, I run an ICU and there's hardly any ICU nurses in Malawi, and those who have training, many of them have left for other countries, and so Malawi's not benefiting from their expertise. And so if I want that ICU to have nurses in 10 years, you need to finish school. um, and you need to eat today. And they kind of looked at me like, no one like that, no one here thinks like that.
Yeah.
Like
So
everyone's just
short
worried
term.
about tomorrow. And I'm like, if you only worry about tomorrow, you're never going to change anything. And so one of the other projects I've worked on at the hospital is renovating the private wards so that, people who can't pay their hospital bills and pay for surgeries can have somewhere nice to stay, and that can subsidize, the cost for everybody who can't. And
Yeah.
that was actually a grant through the US Embassy with like a 16-page application process and on and on and
Yeah.
on. It's a huge pain, but like they want to follow every penny. And so that's what I think a lot of these discussions miss is that, if you don't build up like sort of that middle level of society, you're
Yeah.
gonna keep having the poor needing help, because anyone who gets resources just leaves because there's not just the
Yeah.
entire sort of economic structure for them to make it in a country like Malawi.
Yeah. So true. So
All
true.
right, so I would be remiss if we didn't use this opportunity for a little bit of basic remedial education about Malawi. We've been talking about it as though the average viewer
Everybody
of this
knows, right?
as knows all about Malawi.
I've
Uh,
been there.
I have never
Okay.
been to Malawi, although a dear
Lovely.
friend did dissertation research there. Um, so help us out. Where is Malawi? Uh, uh, and um, and what are the major cities of Malawi, and
Okay.
what language do people speak in Malawi? Like, tell us a little
Sure.
bit about Malawi.
All right. Well, I can
How
tell you
many
first of
prom
all,
awards
it's
are there?
it's not Maui. I had some people when I said I was moving to Malawi were like, "Aloha." It's like, no, not Maui. Um, so
That's pretty funny, actually.
Classic.
it was great. So if this is Africa, or I don't know if it's that way. Anyway, it's kind of on the southeastern area. It's the landmass is about the size of Pennsylvania, and it's one of the most densely populated countries in Africa. There's about 21 million people. It's also one of the poorest in the world, anywhere from 3 to 7, depending on how you measure. And notably, it's never had a war, and so to be that poor without having a war, um, kind of tells you how difficult it is here. It was a former British colony in a federation with northern and southern Rhodesia, which are now Zambia and Zimbabwe, um, and doesn't or has not traditionally had like a big natural resource to really build the economy. Its resources, its people. Like Zambia had copper, and that basically built Zambia. Malawi just had people, which it sent all over, Africa to mine the gold in South Africa, mine the copper in Zambia, work the farms in Zimbabwe. And their main export for cash is growing tobacco, which is gone way down. I mean, which is probably a good thing for health reasons, but it's not a great thing for Malawi's, budget reasons. And so they also had basically a dictator for the first 30 years.
Really weird one.
And very odd. And so a lot of people, like a lot of the sort of intellectuals or people who tried to sort of stand up to things, either left the country or were accidentalized and fed to the crocodiles. So that kind of made people not, make a lot of noise about things, even if you or I would. And so, even though that regime ended in the 90s, kind of after that, it was kind of like, oh, yay, they're gone. And now it's a free for all. And there was just no accountability whatsoever as a reaction to the authoritarian regime. And I think we're still in, there hasn't been that really stable, trustworthy sort of democratic government long term. There's just so many problems for them to kind of navigate through when you have a very rocky, very not great foundation to start with. It's a beautiful country. It's, kind of like Hawaii. There's lots of mountains. It's the end of the Great Rift Valley. Yeah, it is. And Lake Malawi is one of the largest and deepest lakes in the world. So there's a lot of natural beauty, but we're decades behind even our immediate neighbors when it comes to resources, medical especially. But just in general, you go to Kenya and you feel like you're 50 years ahead.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Although Kenya is a good, Kenya has some different but Kenya's mainly has its people too, but it got on the development train, like economic investment and capitalism train, like much earlier. So they've been able, but they're a service. They have agriculture, but they're a tourism service economy, very diverse. So I mean, that's sometimes in Africa, having the natural resources can be counterproductive because it just fuels
DRC
corruption. Yeah,
right. Fuels the kleptocracy.
That's right.
Right.
We are going to leave it there. Beth, it's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Beth is one of the good guys,
welcome.
In my opinion.
Girl.
Girl, sorry. I heard guys is actually a gender neutral term in its origin, so I don't know.
I feel appropriated. No.
We're gonna.
She's one of the good people. She's one of the good people.
All right, people, find charities that are doing good work in health in Africa and support them. There's no immediate step up for USAID, but we got to start investing in longer term step ups. To our Norwegian viewers,
get with the program.
Get with the program. There are nursing students in Malawi that need help, and you guys are made out of money. Get on it.
Dripping with oil.
We're going to be back on Monday. Monday is a very special day across two major related axes. One, it is the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I will be out Sunday night at the Russian embassy with Lord and Lady Laser.
Oh, I'll come.
Y'all should join me.
Yeah.
We're gonna support some Ukrainian protesters. We're gonna be back Monday evening supporting Russian protesters at the embassy. And Saturday day, there is a mass rally at the Lincoln Memorial. You should all be there, because if we don't show a large presence for this, the president and his apes are going to think that people don't care about the abandonment of Ukraine. That is thing number one. We're going to talk about it on Monday on the show. Thing number two, Monday is the release of the Escalation podcast by Lawfare. We have a big event at Brookings to launch it. We're going to play some excerpts of it. We're going to talk about the show. And if I do say so myself, this is a fucking amazing piece of work that Nastia and Tyler and Max did under Lawfare's umbrella. There is nothing like it that has ever been released. It is a sort of comprehensive narrative history of U.S.-Ukrainian relations since independence vis-a-vis Russia. It is remarkably good, and it is completely gripping. And so that will be Monday. We're going to talk about it on the show. We're going to listen to some of it. Hey, until then, keep the faith, do something good for, the world to deal with the situation. Doesn't have to be a big thing, a little thing. Help a nursing student, give aid and comfort to your neighbor. And we're going to be back. See you soon.
Thank